We'll call this meeting of the Humboldt County Association of Governments on this January 18th, 2024 to order. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, Chair Mike Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Adeline Jones.
Here.
Supervisor Steve Madrone.
Present.
Mayor Kim Burgell.
Here.
Councilmember Kimberly White.
Here.
Councilmember Skip Jorgensen.
Here.
Councilmember Jack West.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Orr. PAC member Natalie Arroyo.
Here.
PAC member Saskia Reimer Burnett.
I'm here and I'm in for Tatiana today.
All right, thank you. And at this time, we'll adjourn as the HCOG board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And our first item of business is public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any public comment?
None.
I see none. We'll move. The next item of business is the consent calendar. We have one item today, the approval of the meeting record. Is any public comment on that item? Any board comments or questions?
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None? Passes. Moving right along, we're at the action items, which today is an amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan to define major transit stops. We have a staff report.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the item before you is an action item, as you said, to consider an amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan, which is VROOM. And this would be to define major transit stops. When we adopted VROOM in it was January of 2021. There really wasn't any reason to define major transit stops. There wasn't any legislation or any rules that would be triggered by having that definition in our plan. Since that time, there's been several housing bills, notably AB 2097. These are bills that are meant to speed up the production and affordability of housing. And what this particular bill does is it prohibits parking minimums in areas within a half mile of a major transit stop. Normally, the standard definition of a major transit stop with sort of 15-minute headways, we don't have any transit area that receives that much service, but there is a provision that says, or as defined in the Regional Transportation Plan. So what we've come to realize is that there would be a benefit to defining these stops, and that the stops that are proposed in the staff report and on the resolution, these are the most used stops. They have the highest number of on-offs every day. I do want to call out that I received a correction from HTA. The stop at Cal Poly Library Circle, it is definitely the most used stop, but that number is high. They had some glitch in the way they were accounting for the on-offs there and double counted a little bit. So the actual number there is 391 of average daily on-offs at Cal Poly Library Circle. Still the most used stop. It doesn't change that, but just wanted to be clear on that level because it seemed extremely high. But basically, I think we've got buy-in from the jurisdictions. We've also received some input from the public that are in support of this. And I think some of the feedback I received is that they'd be support of even expanding the definition further. At this time, we wanted to kind of realize this immediate benefit and kind of think of this as sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of we know that these are the most utilized stops. Because it does require a prohibition on parking, we want to make sure that we're in close collaboration with all of our member agencies before we would define a major transit stop. I think there's benefits to thinking about stops that have the most frequency, but also in areas that maybe have lower populations where there is only one stop in the community, things like that. Even if they don't have as much on-offs, it still may be a major transit stop and there may be benefits to defining it as such. But we wouldn't want to do that without close collaboration and make sure that our member jurisdictions are feeling good about that and understand, kind of the ramifications of including a stop in their jurisdiction in this policy. So for now, it would be limited to the stops at Cal Poly Library Circle, Bayshore Mall, Mall, Arcata Transit Center, F Street and Harris Street, College of the Redwoods, Eureka Transit Center, and Valley West in Arcata. And I have vetted these with all the jurisdictions that would be affected, and they're all on board for these designations. So I'll leave it at that and just take any questions if you have any.
Any board member questions for Supervisor Madrone?
Yeah, so I appreciate this item. In McKinleyville, there's a subdivision coming in that's got significantly reduced parking as part of its proposal. I think it's something like 60 some units with only 80 parking spots. Of course, many of these apartments in a highly dense subdivision will be single people, sometimes double. Neighborhoods are concerned about overflow parking on the streets and things like that. So it wouldn't be required, and they wouldn't be required to reduce parking or allowed to reduce parking in that case because McKinleyville doesn't have any stops with high volume. Is that correct?
That's the way it would work now. Right now, we're just proposing these specific stops that are outlined. I think in the future, it makes sense to look at more of a characteristic. So if you had frequency of such and such, then your stop is included, as opposed to identifying specific locations, because then we would, as we improve our transit service, we're kind of always forced to look at amendments. So if we had more of characteristics defined, I think that that's a better long-term approach, and that's what I'd like to be working towards. And then you would know if you could bring that level of service to your community that you would trigger this provision and know that the parking wouldn't be required in those areas. And then just to say too that nothing prevents it doesn't prevent a developer from providing parking. It prevents those being minimum required parking in those areas. So right now there'd be no impact for McKinleyville, but in the future, if transit improves or we want to have a different definition, that could be something that could come into play.
I appreciate that explanation. It's sort of a catch-22. There's this place we want to get to, but we're not there yet. And so that's the difficult period, that transition where through densification, hopefully transit will become more possible in McKinleyville. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other PAC member Arroyo?
How have other counties with similar characteristics to ours handled this? What kinds of definitions have they put in place about major transit stops?
I haven't seen that happening.
Okay.
The MPOs, the larger jurisdictions, they have this coming through a totally different section of law, which is under CEQA when they're defined, and they have a sustainable community strategy. So it's really just a whole different structure. So I don't know that other regions as small as ours have kind of dove into this just yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd be really interested in seeing us explore that frequency of service or some other metric in addition to ridership. I mean, obviously, looks like we've just used those above 100 for now, which is great. Those are clearly, frequently used stops, but I'd love to explore other avenues because ultimately I think this would increase ridership over time if there were more housing developments near transit corridors. So thank you.
Okay, we will open for public comment if there's any public comment.
Hi, my name is Kristen Kenyon. I'm the Development Services Director for the City of Eureka. So welcome. I just want to say that the city supports, the city staff supports this, and we thank Beth for moving on this quickly. With the state is really supportive of urban infill development because they've realized all of the social, economic, and environmental impacts, externalities of sprawl. And so they're giving all these credits and grant opportunities and removing all these regulatory barriers, but they have a one-size-fits-all definition for stuff that's based on a perspective of a large metropolitan area like the Bay Area. And if you look at Eureka in that context, we don't look dense or urban, and we miss out on all these benefits. And so it's really important to have these local definitions because if you look at Eureka within this rural Humboldt County context, we're the densest urbanist place you get, and we have much lower average vehicle mile traveled stats per capita than the regional average. So I do think that the state intends to support us, but they don't see us. And this is like one step to help them understand what urban infill is in Humboldt. And I understand that other urban clusters and smaller cities probably will want this too, but I encourage you to expand it later, but I really would love if you adopted the stops today, just the 3 in Eureka, so we can immediately get some of those benefits. And I'm just thinking, like, heaven forbid the Bayshore Mall completely dies and we lose Walmart and Kohl's, but if it did, and there was a defined major transit stop there, I know that would help us get planning money for redevelopment, and it would help somebody. It's another thing that would help people want to come in and redevelop the site. Like, I think it's a great economic development opportunity to have these identified in Eureka. So again, I just want to thank you for doing this.
Thank you for your public comment. And Colin, I believe you're waiting to get in.
Yeah. Hi, Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I wanted to also give a big thank you to the HCOG staff for bringing this forward. Some of you may know that parking mandates they're often the most costly local rules for a housing project, and in fact, they make a lot of potential infill projects just infeasible. So also, the public policy rationale really for these mandates has been pretty much debunked over the last few decades. So the parking reforms in AB 2097 are, I think, some of the most significant new housing policies to come out of Sacramento in the recent years. But without taking this step, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of those reforms. That said, we are advocating for applying the major transit stop designation more broadly. And specifically, we think it should be applied to stops that receive at least hourly service or at least half-hourly service, with the logic being that this bill doesn't impose any restrictions, it just removes the parking mandates. So if a nearby housing builder doesn't believe that the designated stop provides sufficient service to reduce car dependence, they can still spend the money to provide, plenty of parking. But the designation provides the option to design more affordable and equitable and environmentally friendly projects that cater to transit users, which is a whole new world of possibilities for infill housing. And we just think that option should be available as widely as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another public comment.
Thank you. My name is Raylene Crick. I'm the Real Estate Development Director and Community Liaison for ACGC, Adams Commercial General Contracting. Thank you to HCOG for bringing this to the board.
Is your mic on?
Closer.
Is there a green light?
No. Okay.
So there should be a button there you can press.
Okay. How about now?
It's probably better.
Can
Is
I
there a
start
green
over?
light on now?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Raylene Crixton. I'm the Real Estate Development Director and Community Liaison for ACGC, which is Adams Commercial General Contracting. Thank you to HCOG for bringing this to the board. As you all know, the state has a blind spot for rural communities such as ours, and this is a momentous opportunity to address that, as well as take advantage of some of these benefits that the state affords us in growing our community in a smart and dense fashion. So I'm here to support major transit stop definition in Eureka, but also supporting and urging the board to consider a method to define major transit stops in more rural communities. Like it's been mentioned, Rio Del, Fortuna, and other communities might only have one bus stop. And although it doesn't meet the definition for major transit stop on a state level, for those communities, it definitely is the major transit stop in town. From a development perspective, defining these major transit stops in areas where we can densify and can continue to do infill development in order to preserve our rural communities would be a great benefit for not only our community at large, but also our environment as well. So, yep, that's it. Thank you for your consideration, and thanks to the board.
And thank you for your comment. Right, I was gonna see if someone, you want us to read that into the record, or?
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of it. It's very short. We have.
I can read it into the record. That's from Solomon Everta, and he writes, HCOG Policy Advisory Committee. I encourage the HCOG Policy Advisory Committee to recommend that the HCOG Board adopt Resolution 24-01, amending the Regional Transportation Plan, VROOM 2022 through 2042, to include major defined transit stops. This action will allow us locally to take advantage of Assembly Bill 2097, which removes barriers to construction of affordable housing related to parking requirements. As a local business owner and commercial property owner, this seems like one of the many tools we need to implement in order to address the issues of homelessness, general prosperity, and livability in Old Town Eureka, where I am based. Thank you for your time and service, Solomon Everta. And thank you, Solomon, for the letter. Is there any other questions or comments from the board? Yes.
Well, I do support this as well. I feel like, well, I know that we've had funding obstacles. You know, we don't have anything that qualifies as a major transportation hub, and that can be a problem when trying to get grants. So I think this is a great opportunity to get us at least in the door, and then we can always develop further as we go along. I think this isn't one and done, but certainly I think moving forward is an excellent idea for our community.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions or comments, do we have a motion?
I move staff recommendation. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll second yours.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. And can we get a vote? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes.
Wonderful.
We have no informational items, but we do have a very good piece of information from our executive director and her year-end report.
Go back to the podium just so I can not be looking over the computer. I'll just point at you when I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting when you see that all put together in one.
All right, this is becoming a bit of a tradition. I think we're on the third year of this end of year highlights now. So next slide, please. So first off, just huge thank you to the HCOG team. We're going to go through kind of some of the highlights. I'm going to try not to repeat everything that was in the handout that we prepared, but just highlight a couple of the big ones and then add to it a little bit. But first off, huge thanks to the HCOG team. We are very small, but I like to think of us as very mighty. We get a lot done, and I really believe that we have some of the very most talented staff in the whole region working at HCOG, which is how we're able to accomplish so much. So Stevie, Una, Amy, and of course Debbie, who just left us. I just can't thank them enough for all their support throughout the whole year and the years I've been here so far. So next slide. And then also a big thanks to all of you in the PAC, and of course the TAC and the SS TAC. I know that it's primarily made up of volunteers and, especially the board, and that this is one of many committee assignments. And I think when we go through and you see all that we've accomplished this year, it really takes everybody showing up, being here to vote, being engaged to kind of move each item forward. And if that stalls out at any point, we're missing out on funding, we're missing out on opportunities for our region. So I just can't thank you all enough for being here every month for these very exciting meetings. Even if they seem, sometimes they're very, maybe we just have a consent agenda, but getting those claims paid, getting that stuff voted on is so important for every jurisdiction to keep moving forward. So just thanks to all of you for being present and committing to HCOG. So first thing, big picture, is the funding. So this last year, we had 10.5 million allocated to transit agencies and jurisdictions that flowed through HCOG to our member agencies and to the transit agencies, a huge benefit to our region. We also were in a STIP cycle this year. So we had 10.56 million that we allocated towards projects. And in the handout, you can recall all the various projects, but several of our member agencies were able to take advantage of this funding. We really were able to spread it out and keep projects moving forward kind of step by step. And so there's an exciting list of projects there. And then we had a huge grant year last year with 3.5 million in new grants coming to our region. And we'll talk more about what those grants are in a little bit. So major events, the Indianola groundbreaking, we did that in the summertime. That was pretty fun. That was after over 20 years of working on this project. And now construction has started. Everyone driving through there, can see it clearly. But it's definitely moving forward. This later today at this meeting, during the Caltrans report, we'll have project manager Jeff Pimentel just giving us a little update about where they're at, kind of hitting this wet weather period. But it was really nice after all those years of working towards it to see construction begin out there. And then we had the Dan Burden visit, which was a huge event, and really huge thanks to Una for planning it. I think Dan visits communities all across the nation and beyond, and I think Una got kudos for making it the most organized visit he's done anywhere. So a huge thanks. And I think we had over 400 people attend all the various events. So yes, please.
Not to interrupt you, but he did come to Blue Lake as well.
Yeah.
I just noticed you mentioned Arcata, Eureka, Manila, McKinleyville.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So he did come and we walked with him in Blue Lake.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. And I went on that walk. It was definitely a good one. I'm sorry I didn't make that into the notes. But yeah, over the meetings, we had the walk audits, and then we had meetings with the Wharfinger. We had meetings that were focused on city and county staff. Yeah, and over 400 people attended. So I think it's one of the most well-attended HCOG activities we've ever done. And we're looking forward to doing more like that in the future with the different grants we've received. So transit was a big focus of ours last year. The transit development plan was a really big effort. And for those of you that were here at the meeting, we had that very great, thorough presentation by our consultants, LSE. It was a lengthy product, and we really are benefiting from the details that were provided, and that is sort of our blueprint moving forward with transit. We also gave that same presentation, just focused on HTA. I think it was last month before maybe, but we had Gordon from LSE come and present the HTA portion of that to the HTA board as well. So they were all in the loop on that. We also had our triennial performance audit, and then the fiscal compliance audit and on-met transit needs. Those we do every year, but the big plans this last year that got completed were the transit development plan and the performance audit. Go ahead. And then just a reminder, this was kind of the take-home message from the transit development plan. This figure kind of highlights where we're trying to expand microtransit, where we want to think about park and rides, new transit hubs, express services. So this kind of becomes our blueprint, and we will be kind of working towards all of these different features over the next few years, looking for funding sources, looking for partners, that kind of thing, to make sure we can implement as much of this plan as possible. Actually, and I'll mention one more thing. One of the other things, so this figure kind of shows the physical changes, transit hubs, different routes, things like that. There were also some studies mentioned in this plan. And one of those, we actually just finished a grant today and a grant application today through the Caltrans Sustainable Communities. They have a transit strategic partnership grant opportunity. And so we applied with that with several partners from all over the region, including some of the tribes, several of the cities, just really looking beyond that 5-year period and looking at our ridership increase targets, which is to double ridership in short order. And so how would we achieve that in the long run? What kind of connections do we need to have? What kind of services do we need to provide? So we have a whole plan to kind of look at that more comprehensively and plan out the next 20 years to reach our goal. And that will, so we just submitted the grant for that today. So we've already basically implementing, one of the recommendations from this plan. So then on another note for transit, really, kind of we're working closely with HTA on a regular basis to support that increased ridership. That's really a big focus of ours. If you recall, last month your board voted to give the contract to Studio 6 for transit marketing. So we'll be starting that. They're signing that contract this week, and we'll be launching on that effort. And from there, just continuing to work on public participation and getting that ridership increased. And then one thing I think I've mentioned in my executive director's reports, but we haven't, had anything actually come before the board, was last year. It was due at the end of December, so this was a big effort that Stevie really took the lead on, and I much appreciate that. But SB 125 is Formula TIRSUP and ZETSUP. And this money is really to help transit agencies avoid the fiscal cliff. So this is, if you remember, we had huge ridership declines during COVID. It has not come back, although we are seeing it come back. It still has not reached the pre-pandemic levels, and so that's happening. Not only statewide, but far beyond our state borders as well. But in terms of what California is doing about it, they are providing over the next 4 years $16.4 million in formula funding to our region to help with transit operations, and most of it is going to go towards operations. Some of it can go towards capital improvements. But at the end of December, we had to submit a plan to how we would use that $16.4 million. So we've been working closely with our transit providers to figure that out. Our plan was submitted on time. Like I said, Stevie really took the lead on that and did a great job kind of coordinating and collaborating. So we expect to receive the first tranche of money. I think it's in March. It's going to come. And then after that, it'll be kind of yearly after that. So we'll be spending some time in 2024 administering this program. All right, so as I mentioned, we had a very successful grant year. So these grants were all awarded in 2023, and we'll be starting on them. And this is a huge focus of our 2024 work going forward this year. So REAP 2.0, this was a grant where we provided pre-development funding to the We Are Up project in McKinleyville. That was the infill project for people with and without disabilities, and affordable housing project there. And then also funding for McKinleyville microtransit. So we'd have a two-year pilot of McKinleyville microtransit funded through this. So we're still working on our contracting through HCD. It takes a very long time and requires a whole lot of patience, but we're getting closer, hopefully, and we'll be able to launch on that this year. And then we were also successful in the last round of Caltrans's Sustainable Community grants, and we received a grant for multimodal and neighborhoods planning. And this is really coming straight out of the VROOM document, where we have a policy or an action item to do a level of traffic stress throughout the greater Humboldt Bay region. And what that level of traffic stress is, it's actually looking at the stress level of a pedestrian or a cyclist. So we often think about like level of level of service for cars, that kind of thing. This is kind of really more focused on, like, for pedestrians, for cyclists, how stressful is it to use our streets, and where could we enhance the connections? Hopefully this effort, we're going to have some methodology that'll help us really map that out for the greater Humboldt Bay region, and then expanding to the whole county once we have that methodology down. But what it will do is it will highlight the areas where we can see that we need just a little bit, maybe there's a gap and we could really get a lot of bang for our buck to fill in that connection, and we can see where it's really stressful. We can kind of look at essential destinations, critical places like schools, or other places people need to get to, and see if there's good ways that they can move around in those areas. So it kind of helps us with a couple of the different policies or action items in the regional transportation plan, one being to conduct that level of traffic stress, but also to really promote the kind of 25 or 30-minute city. How do we get to all our essential destinations without driving within that time frame? And this will help highlight the areas we need to work on, and then having them listed there will help kind of make those fixes eligible for funding in the future. And then we were also successful in the federal grant, which was a Safe Streets and Roads for All program. This is for a Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. This is the first, I think, of from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This is the first funding we've received from that, as in terms of discretionary funding towards a grant. And we have all of our member jurisdictions participating in this. The TAC was very active in helping us get this going and making sure that everyone was on board board, and we also have all the tribal lands will be covered in this regional plan as well. So we had great partnerships on that, and we'll be soon to contract on that one as well. We just got the notice to proceed and kind of get started on that Humboldt multimodal one. The Safe Streets and Roads for All probably be a couple months before we have the contract to proceed, but we have the awards. So huge focus for next year, but a lot of grant writing in 2023. And then other activities that were identified in our regional transportation plan room, we continue to support Bike Month, and we've had a member of HCOG staff sit on the Eureka Bike Plan Committee. We continue to be very involved with Safe Routes to School. We administer the Humboldt Bay Trail Fund Committee, and then we have helped with the administration of the grant that the county received, which is the Eureka to College of the Redwoods Trail Stakeholder Group. So the county received a grant to kind of do the feasibility of that, and we've been helping just to kind of provide some of the administrative support. Meetings are held at HCOG, that kind of thing. Just anything we can do to kind of help, give a little extra boost and keep it moving forward. ZEV transition, zero emission vehicle transition, was identified in VROOM as well, and to that end, we've been participating monthly on a transportation roundtable with our CEA. We're making sure that we're coordinated among our efforts, not duplicative of our efforts, and really taking advantage of all the good work they do around this subject. And then there is a carbon reduction program. We have about 1.2 million that's coming to our region for carbon reduction activities. And the TAC has expressed interest in a region-wide fleet charging infrastructure studies to basically help with some of the clean fleet rules that are coming down that will require city fleets to become zero emission, in pretty short order. So I think on that one, we're kind of in the feasibility, figuring out who we can partner with, that kind of thing. But that's sort of the initial direction from the TAC on what we're going to do with that funding source. And then on the climate, last year we did join the Offshore Wind Community Benefit Network. So we continue to participate in those meetings and stay updated on what's going on with offshore wind. I think it was last week, the Harbor District took, partly because of the advocacy of the Offshore Wind Community Benefit Network and partly others advocating as well, it really took a step and made a resolution towards a green port, which was great to see and know that we'll be as energy efficient as possible from the start on that, which is a huge benefit to all of our climate goals. And then we also have a section of our RTP in VROOM that is housing and vibrant neighborhoods, and we continue to work on a number of initiatives towards that end. We still have the REAP 1.0. This has been going on for quite a few years now. We're wrapping it up. We'll have it done kind of in the fall of this year. But this is funding. If you remember, we did the multimedia catalog with this. So the videos we saw are related to housing and homelessness that were prepared with this funding. That whole catalog has been put together. We also have funding in here for our member jurisdictions to do work towards adopting pro-housing policies. That money is flowing. And then finally, there's the Regional Climate Action Plan. And originally, we thought the REAP 1.0 funding would fund the environmental review for that. And we had a bit of a setback there, just realizing that the way the draft was written, it wouldn't reach a qualified status, meaning we wouldn't be able to rely on it in terms of CEQA review. So we're actually going to use our funds to go back and revise that draft. The county is taking the lead on that. So it will be revised to a point where then it'll be ready for that environmental review and it could be relied on. The whole point of including it in REAP, because it is a housing program, the idea was to allow housing projects to kind of rely on the climate analysis that was done. And if you're compliant with the climate action plan, you wouldn't need to redo the greenhouse gas section of your CEQA document. You could rely on the climate action plan, but we weren't going to get there with the current draft. So it's being redone, and we're going to get closer and hopefully still have that as a good document that helps us in a lot of different ways, but one would be to speed up housing once we can rely on it. I have started for about a year now. We've been doing quarterly RENA meetings. We are, at HCOG, we are responsible for the regional housing needs allocation that happens about once every 7 years. And we are still not right, ours isn't coming until about 2027, but but it is a bit of a hot potato, and it's a bit of a quick timeline once we receive the numbers from HCD. So one of the things that I thought would really help would just be to just engage with all of the community development directors from every city before we have to divvy up those numbers. Really start talking about, you know, what's worked in the past, what hasn't, what other goals are we trying to meet, like some of our climate goals, and how do they serve us in terms of the way we've allocated RHNA numbers in the past. So the idea being that we can kind of build trust and consensus long before we see the actual numbers in front of us, and we kind of have an approach in mind, and then hopefully it won't feel as rushed or as arbitrary when it comes up, which has kind of been, like I said, a bit of a hot potato in the past. So I think those are being well received. We're getting fairly good participation, but it's just also nice to have a venue to speak with the community development directors from each jurisdiction. You know, we interact with our TAC all the time, and that tends to be our public works folks, but you know, sometimes the message doesn't get out to, you know, everyone in the jurisdiction. So it's really nice to have kind of a direct line, and that's been happening through the REAP 1.0 grant as well. And so it's been nice to kind of build those relationships over the course of the years. And then, as you remember, recently we got a presentation about a regional housing trust fund and just consideration of that. So that was something that came up in 2023 that I thought was worth highlighting. And then equity and relationship building, I would say, you know, our approach on this really is to make sure that we're being as present as possible as we build relationships, and we don't want to be transactional. We don't want it to be just like a one and done. You heard from HCOG when we needed something and you never hear from us again. So to that end, with our small staff, it is hard to get everywhere we need to go, but we do participate as much as we can and try to reach communities that maybe aren't more traditional participants of our process. So Una this year was helpful in helping to participate in and arrange the Celebrating Our Community Fair. And then she attends Promotores and Latino Net meetings on a regular basis. So that I think is helpful to connect with our Spanish-speaking community. We are constantly writing letters of support. I joke often that that's Stevie's part-time job to write letters of support, but it really is important for our relationships when we hear, you know, most often it's from our member agencies or it's from transit agencies, but it can also be from nonprofits in our community that are working towards something. And if their grant application supports our policies that are in the regional transportation plan, it's easy for us to write them a letter of support. So we do that check and make sure that it is something that matches up with our policies that have already been adopted, but it is a nice way to lend our support. We do also get a lot of requests from our tribal nations for letters of support, and we're happy to deliver on those, and they you know, reciprocate as well and help us out when we're looking for grants. We gave, you know, as many people as will have us, we give presentations. So this last year we went to McKinleyville Rotary. I did a presentation at Ollie, and then also Cal Poly Sustainability Across Curriculums. And at these places, we generally just kind of explain what HCOG is. My first question is always, who's heard of HCOG? And I have yet to get more than half of the people to raise their hands. So I'm really hoping one of these days, after many presentations, I'll go into a room and they'll be like, everybody's heard of it. So that's just a simple thing we do. Again, trying to build those relationships, raise awareness about what we're up to, and make sure people that aren't, you know, traditionally involved in our processes are aware of what's going on. We continue to participate in the North Coast Tribal Transportation Commission. And then the other thing we do around equity is to make sure that we are up to date on sort of best practices, making sure that, you know, things we haven't thought of yet, things that might be a good idea to integrate. So we do try to set aside time for trainings around this. This last year, Una was able to attend the Smart Growth America Equity Summit, which was a virtual conference. And then all of the planners last year finished what was a year-long equity training with CalCog. Staff activities, biggest focus I feel like for last year was really that transition with Debbie's retirement. So really making sure we had a good plan to transition from the fiscal administrative officer. And I think that has been going wonderfully. So I'm glad that we had the long overlap of a half year to get that all set up. And it feels, you know, Debbie's been able to retire, and we do miss her terribly, but so far nothing's fallen through the cracks. So that's a good thing. And then we've I've represented HCOG. I would say in 2023, I feel like, pandemic era sort of travel restrictions really lifted. And I felt like for the first time since I've been here at HCOG, I was able to kind of travel and meet my peers and kind of get out of the region. And as well as Stevie went to the SAFE conference this year. I attended the CalCog Regional Leadership Conference. I also went to the CTC Town Hall in Reading with the North State Super Region, which was a great event to just kind of get acquainted with some of the CTC commissioners. And then I was also able to go to Washington, D.C. this year with the Thriving Communities grant, which actually the Trinidad Rancheria received and was gracious enough to invite me along as a partner. So it's really all about specifically the thriving communities often seem to go towards more rural, certainly under-resourced communities, but just really about capacity building and how we can best take advantage of the infrastructure funding that's out there. So just a wonderful opportunity to get to go to DC, and grateful to the tribe for including me in that. We did have staff advancement. I was able to join the California Planning Roundtable, which was a long-time goal of mine professionally. So I'm excited to have had that happen. It's through the American Planning Association and kind of has a balance of professionals from the north and south. But I will say, as you can imagine, in most of California, their version of north. I'm the first representative on this roundtable from anywhere north of like San Francisco, Marin. So I'm glad to represent the North State. And then Stevie completed the Redwood Coast Leadership Academy this year, which was a great program. And then Una attended the National Bikes Summit. And then along with Councilmember Atkins Salazar, her and I both went to the Coaching Habit, which is a training that CalCog put on. And she's our CalCog rep. So that was a good opportunity for her to go and meet the CalCog folks. And then finally, I just wanted to mention SAFE, always a favorite topic. We, continue to implement the strategic plan that we developed a couple years ago. It took a long time to get our encroachment permit granted for the 22 new call boxes, but at this point it has been granted, which was a big accomplishment. And the poles are in for the most part, but we're still waiting on the equipment. So all of the existing call boxes last year, or really it was the year before, we did the ADA upgrades and all of that was done. But this year we're kind of just waiting on the equipment to finish out these new call boxes. And then the CHP continues to patrol on highways 36 and 96. And over the course of 2023, they were able to help 341 motorists, which is kind of crazy considering, they maybe do 1 or 2 extra patrols a month. So yeah, it's a whole lot of people being helped by that program. And then just a quick talk, kind of what's next in 2024. As we mentioned, we have lots of grants we're going to be implementing. We'll be working on that. We'll have a big focus in project managing on behalf of HTA for the transit marketing. And then we'll be administering that formula TIRSIP ZETSIP, which is that $16.4 million in formula funding coming our way over the next 4 years, specifically set aside for transit. We'll be working on the carbon reduction program allocation. Again, that's $1.2 million. That's over the next 3 years. That's formula funding coming, and we need to figure out how to use that as a region. So we'll start with the TAC on that. Like I said, we've kind of already started and have an idea for the first project. So you'll be receiving recommendations on that once the TAC has made a decision on their recommendations on how to move that money forward. And then the overall work plan, if you can believe it, is already becoming due. The draft is due soon for fiscal year 24-25. So we'll be getting that to the TAC in February, and then it'll come to your board next month as well. And then I'd like to bring you, I'm shooting for April, kind of a comprehensive update on the Regional Transportation Plan progress. We're a couple years into it out of the 4-year cycle, and it might be good to just kind of evaluate sort of what we've focused on so far, kind of what's still hanging out there, and there's a whole lot in that document, and it would probably be good to get some direction too out of which things the board would like to see us focus on moving forward for the last 2 years of that cycle. So yeah, just looking forward to a productive 2024, and thanks again to staff, the board, committees for all that you do. And that's it. Happy to take any questions. I don't know if we need to clap.
Well,
There's a lot.
any questions or comments? It's been a busy year.
Mm-hmm.
Good job. Excellent work.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some questions and comments in a little while. Okay, a lot of information, and HCOG's been busy. At this time, we come to HCOG staff and PAC member reports. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to reconvene. And approve the PAC by motion.
I still move.
We have motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. So now we come to HCOG staff and PAC member reports. And then first is,
I'm good.
You're done,
You
aren't
heard it all. Yeah.
I wasn't going to cut you off, though. So we'll come to Caltrans reports.
Good evening, everybody. I don't have much to report other than, as Beth mentioned, the 24-25 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant application deadline is today, and we received a number of applications, so that is good news. The next step in the process is to do the evaluation, and the evaluations will take place from now through to the spring of this year, and then the announcements will be in September. And we believe that we have quite a few applications again this year, possibly up to about 9 applications so far. Thank you.
You have a question? Yes.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Last week on the news, I was looking at a bunch of flooding up in the northeast of the country, and there was a project that used the styrofoam fill within the structures, and water got to it, and it just completely blew up and expanded. So I'm just wondering, if you could maybe ask some of the Caltrans staff. I assume they've considered this. I mean, the Indianola structure is going to be in the footprint of sea level rise. That's partly why the structure is designed the way it is, but it's going to have all that styrofoam that's stored on 299 as part of the component of all that. So I would love to, hear some feedback on, has that been considered? How will that work? If it, anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying. Hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
You bet.
Thanks. Any other questions or? Seeing none, PAC member Arroyo.
Just to clarify, was Jeff going to present, or is that a separate matter? Okay, I think it's still Caltrans
It is the Caltrans
time,
report.
so I will go after.
Okay.
Shall I go now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have much, but I like to attend these meetings, just give you guys the latest. So in terms of the Indianola Undercrossing project, for anyone that's driven by there lately, not a whole lot of activity, but that's all due to the weather we've been receiving. So we expect that to be the case for the time being. In terms of work completed to date, you'll notice on the east side of the highway where the drill rig was, and we had drilled the column support and embankment columns. Those are all complete on that side. And the next step on that side will be to install the load transfer platform, which will essentially be a layer of rock material that the pavement will go on, and will transfer the loads from the roadway down into the columns that were installed in the ground to give the ground the support and strength it needs to support it. So the first step will be to put in that load transfer platform and then detour northbound 101 traffic into that location as far east as the limits of work are. And we expect that northbound detour to be in place on or around by July of this year. So this is really all kind of weather dependent, how wet of a winter we have, and when things start drying up and the contractor can really get out there in earnest and start working regularly. Other than that, we'll be continuing to install the column support and embankment within the median area. We'll also be removing the northbound lanes to put the column support and embankment in that location where everyone's driving in that northbound direction currently today. So that's the latest. Real wet. Nice to see us get a lot of rainfall, but it is impacting our construction a little bit. But really nothing outside the norm that we wouldn't expect in the winter here on the North Coast. So I wouldn't say that we're concerned about any delays or anything of that nature due to that. But I know the public driving by with all the equipment sometimes can be frustrating to not see activity out there. But we are working over what is essentially almost just like a Play-Doh material, just horrible mud that is difficult to work on and doesn't have a whole lot of strength. And when you mix a lot of rainfall in that, it doesn't make it a great surface to work on. So that's the latest, and I can answer any questions anyone may have at this time.
Any questions for Jeff? Yes.
Jeff, thank you for your report. I think earlier you mentioned that it took, you went 60 to 90 feet down on the east side of 101 to hit bedrock. Is that a similar situation with the west side of Highway 101 in terms of hitting bedrock?
We are actually, to my knowledge, not hitting bedrock at those depths. Bedrock was much, much deeper. And so that is baked into the design in terms of the number of columns that we have. So we are primarily relying on skin friction and some end-bearing strength from the columns on the material below. But you're correct in that we would typically like to hit bedrock and take our columns down to that elevation and get a lot of end-bearing strength from that. But unfortunately, that type of material is much further down, and we designed it in such a way that we're not utilizing that point in the kind of soil strata to provide the strength. So in terms of the depths in the median versus the outside, I don't have that information with me at this time, but it's definitely something I know who to call to get that information from if you'd like me to.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff? Seeing none. Thank you for that. Thank you. Your reports always convey the information that people ask about. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. We'll see you next month.
Okay. All right. And now we come to Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. I just wanted to report out, I'm not sure if everyone heard this. I was sick, I believe, at our last HCOG meeting, so I wasn't here to report out that the Humboldt Transit Authority Board decided to offer free rides to people who are accessing emergency winter weather shelters. So on the days that those winter weather shelters are activated due to extreme cold or wind or conditions that warrant the opening of them, there will be free bus rides to help people get to those places. And a lot of them do have shuttles to get people from point A to point B, but it's to help people get to the shuttle pickup spot. So just really trying to reduce those barriers. So that was something that we don't necessarily, it's completely feasible for HTA to do that. And we're seeing this year as a pilot to see, how many rides were needed and what the usage is so that we can figure out how to make it a more long-standing practice in the future. So it could be that there will be operational costs that need to be kind of figured out with that, and we'll be doing that work this year. I think that's all I have from HTA.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, someplace, I don't remember where, but I saw a promotional item on the Redwood Express that had a tentative schedule and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, there's been some media coverage of that, which has been really exciting. So yes, that is up and running, and we'd love to see people riding it. It's a pretty low cost alternative to get to Ukiah and then not make that connection further south or to other destinations. So really exciting.
Good. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for bringing that up. I just wanted to appreciate that. We had a lady come to council Tuesday night who was on the initial run to Ukiah, and she was so delighted that she could go and, pay $2 and shop at the Peg House and spend, $50 and go to J.C. Penney and spend another $50 and come home and be here for the council meeting. So it was, I'm really appreciative of that. And in the summer when there's water skiing on Lake Mendocino, that's going to be an awesome opportunity. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments for PAC member?
I just wanted to comment that I'm real excited about that new service for the unhoused to get them to where they need to be during these extreme weather things. And apparently, I spoke to Darlene at Arcata House Partnership, and the drivers are all aware, and it's working. So, yeah, thank you for doing that.
That's so great to hear. And I do want to appreciate the folks who brought that forward to our board. It was not, I would love to say it was our idea, but it was community members and advocates who brought it forward. So great job bringing that up. And those are exactly the kinds of things we need to hear from people to utilize the assets that we have to serve the people that we have.
All right. Any board member reports? Well, seeing none, this time we will adjourn as the board and go into closed session pursuant to Government Code 54-957. HCOG board will meet in closed session with the executive director to discuss a yearly evaluation.